Okay, so we're going to start talking about how things are unfolding over here in El Salvador. And this is, I mean, we're going to be discussing several situations that have been happening in this year since Bukele started as president. And so we already discussed this with the board, but some of you might not know much about it, but we're going to concentrate on some specific aspects. For example, that our president has focused mostly on militarization, and I hope that many of you know that on February 9, several people, I mean, of his friends and soldiers went to the Legislative Assembly to put pressure on Congress people to have a loan approved, and that marked a precedent on how far he was going to go. He's been always pushing for this kind of security and confrontation with all those people that disagree with him. And and the other thing that we want to share with you is that his government advertising schedule has been mostly for people that are always uh, in the, you know, the same group of people that are have been or historically receiving this advertising schedule, and the channels 2, 4, and 6. uh, the government presented at the beginning this plan Cuscatlan, which even though at the beginning everybody said that there were no plans for environment and other kind of things that were criticized from the beginning, either way, this plan has been completely forgotten, and this is why many people think that we are concerned of where this is going, where this is heading, because we don't see that there's a path or a route to follow. The 2020 budget had led funds for health, for environment, for agriculture, for the Association of Water, ANDA, among others. And in the budget, there were close to 87 millions that were not really justified, were like in the past have been used, you know, for, you know, security or discretionary things, and that is essentially the same in this administration. And there 22 millions of that budget were just for advertisement, just for advertisement. And yeah. And then we are going to talk about the COVID crisis that you can see in the background is what it was once known as CIFCO, the Center for, you know, conventions, and is what they have transformed and making it the new hospital El Salvador. So whenever you hear that they build a hospital, this infrastructure was already there. It's been mostly about remodeling. Keep that in mind. So with the COVID crisis, we were in lockdown since March 21st until June 6th. And the Legislative Assembly agreed to have this state of exception, which enabled the government to make direct purchases, because that's what this was all about. And the militaries and police forces were allowed to take people to the containment centers if they saw you on the street. And the reinforcement of this police was uh, changing depending on places, but either way there were several cases of human right abuses. Even though we were in lockdown, there was a murder spike in April 21st and April 25th, when there were 31 murders. And people, I mean, it's still a source of debate, because one of the big achievements of the government, or how they portray, is that their security plan has been successful. And we've had I think up to 5 days without any murder. But and they say it's because of this plan. So people wonder, what does that mean? That the plan just did not work on those two specific days, or if the gangs were sending a real message that if they wanted, they could do it. And since we have had several uh, officials that have made kind of arrangements with gangs, it wouldn't be crazy to think about it. And there are Mario Duran, who's going to run for the mayor's office for Nuevas Ideas. There are photos of him also in this meeting with gang leaders. So that's the thing. It's this discourse that the others met with the criminals, but then this party is doing the same. The other thing that you can see over there is that there were these 38 millions that were approved, and 22 of those millions were to build this so-called biggest hospital in Latin America. And as I mentioned to you before, it's about remodeling what was already there and making this hospital. We could have had several small campaign uh, like I don't know the word for the hospitals that you make during war, that it's just like something that is not permanent, and we could have built many of those with those funds. But for many of us, it became pretty clear that with that long time of lockdown, we were just making time for this big hospital to be ready for the show, to put it on display and to showcase what they were able to do. They said that the pavilions would be ready on June 9th, and the entire hospital would be ready on July 15th, and that has not been the case. And over here, you can see when the rain started to happen, this is what it looked like on May 31st. And there are reports, and you can find that those reports on our blog when we have all the lines of things of the different cases that have been discussed, of how the government has chosen, for example, going with this company that was asking more than $1 million more than other company to build these things, and they went with this more expensive offer. And anyway, when the hospital was officially opened, the media was not allowed to go and see. So we don't know for sure how it all looks from within. And there were organizations from the civil society and the Central American University as well that were in this body that was supposed to oversee all the spending of the government during this state of exception. And they resigned because they said that they were not being consulted in all these decisions. So they didn't want to be there just to provide some kind of, you know, to say that everything was great when it wasn't, when they were really not participating at all. The other thing that we wanted to share is that the government said that they were going to give $300 as a bonus for families, like as the Trump administration did, but just a little less. And so overall, there were 450 million, and according to the Court of Account, in the report of these, how these funds were provided, 30 millions of those were granted, and we don't know which parameters they chose. And if you talk with people, not a lot of people received such funds, and then they switched to providing food kits and stuff. And this is another issue because there are reports of these kits are contain, for example, tuna or other products that have been produced by companies like shell companies in Mexico, or companies that were previously attaching this, embezzlement with providing aid to Venezuela. And then we have here the situation with the, like I was mentioning, it's different. The situation of the Hospital El Salvador, as you can see in the photo above you, it's pretty clean. It's all just, it looks pretty, but you don't know how many beds are actually functioning. And there are several reports that mention that when people are healthy or just about to be recovered, they are taken there to make sure that it seems like they recovered over there, and not in the public hospitals where they have been, that are overcrowded and in a very poor condition. Uh, the other thing with public health is that several health units and primary healthcare is not as it used to be. People can go, and when there are chronic disease, they are not being treated the way they were before. And there are also reports of COVID cases in places that have been run by the state, a nursing home and a youth and child center. So is this thing of not being able to trust of those who are running this, and of course in the official speeches is always the legislative assembly's fault, or people are being uh, reckless going to outside or to the beach. I mean, it's always everybody's fault, but not the government's. And the other thing I wanted to mention is what's related about the unions of health workers, because historically you've heard probably of STIS, the Union of Health Worker from the Social Security, but it seems like this is one of several unions of health workers, but they were recently have been uh, with Bukele asking for another lockdown, and there are other unions that have gone outside and protest, asking for proper protection for them, because this is the other thing, that the government has not provided with the necessary materials or gear to handle this situation and be protected themselves. At some point, I think we had the number one spot on how many of fatalities of medical staff here in Central America. And with this, I'm going to let Sulma speak as well.
Thanks, Mario. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you very much, Mario, and hi to everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to see you all. And as Mario was saying, yeah, there is a lot of, or there are a lot of things going on in El Salvador, and we would love to have more time to share a lot and in details, but we don't have enough time. So we are kind of listing the main things that are happening right now. And to continue, I'm going to talk about the food relief that didn't reach anyone or most of our families in our communities. As Mari was saying, we are under lockdown since March 21st, and the president committed himself and with his government to support these families. Mario mentioned about the bonus of $300 that some families receive, and that happened in April. And then in May, he said that he was going to support families with food packages. But again, as Mario was saying, we don't know, or it is not clear. It wasn't clear how the criteria was in order to distribute the food. When we talk to communities in our sister communities, they are saying that more than half of the inhabitants of their communities didn't receive food packages from the government. Um, Even though the government said that during the first phase of the distribution or delivery of food packages, he or the government was going to prioritize those municipalities that were most disadvantaged, but that didn't happen. And then in the second half, or the second in the third week of May, the government started this, like the second phase of the delivery. But many people again did not receive the food packages. Here in my town in Sinquera, they only gave the food to some communities, and not to everyone. And they were saying, we are going to come back and give you the food to, and give the food to everyone, but that didn't happen. And again, in other communities where CRIPDES works, they didn't provide that support. And this was due to lack of coordination from the government with local structures like juntas directivas, or even with municipalities. The central government provided the food packages through the army, or using the army and workers of the water institution, national water institution. And so it was not through the community structures. um, and then regarding public transportation is unlocked since May the 7th. And can you imagine how difficult it is for our families or for our communities travel from their village to the main city? So it's very hard. Many of them have to walk far distances to go to the market, or to go to the nearest town to get medicine. We have heard also from people from our communities that many of their people have lost their jobs, because since there is no public transportation, they cannot go to their workplace. Some others they have that are working in public offices, like for example in the health system or in the police. Many of them have to pay like high cost for transportation, because they cannot pay a room or rent a room in San Salvador to stay overnight there. So they have to be paying like more than $80 a week to travel. Um, and regarding Salvadorans that are or were stranded abroad, this has been a very difficult situation for many Salvadorans and their families or relatives here in El Salvador as well. We know that one of the main characteristics of this current government is to provide misleading information. So at the beginning of the quarantine, the Ministry of Migration, they were saying that they were already receiving stranded Salvadorans, but but then it was said that what they were receiving were deportees, not Salvadorans that were outside of El Salvador due to the COVID, or due to the when the president or the government closed the border. So so the ads that the government presented was or were mostly the people from the government receiving or welcoming people or stranded Salvadorans at the airport, but in reality, what they were receiving were deportees from United States. It was until May 11th when the Constitutional Chamber asked the Ministry of Migration to present a detailed plan with specific dates to return the people that were stranded abroad. And so they have been struggling a lot outside of El Salvador. We have heard testimonies of people that are, for example, in Spain, that they travel in February or in March to Spain because of a study. And due to COVID, they couldn't find a job, and their classes were suspended. Their classes were going to be online, and that's why they needed to come back to El Salvador, but the government of El Salvador didn't provide a solution to that problem. And regarding deportees, that's still has been happening. It has been happening since the pandemic. During the first week, when the president said in like March 19, the president said that all borders were going to be closed. He said also that El Salvador was not going to receive deportees, but that only lasted for 1 week. Then a week later, there were flights coming from United States with deportees. Between March and April, there were around 2,172 deportees that came to El Salvador, and those were sent to the containment centers. The government of El Salvador was saying that deportees were tested before leaving the United States. They were tested in detention centers, but there were some testimonies of deportees saying that they were not tested in detention centers, and they were tested here in El Salvador in the containment centers a month after their arrival. So there were, and also the centers, containment centers here were not adequate for them. They were located, or they were sent to the estadio, the estadio. It was the stadium or the
stadium.
Yeah. So it was not adequate to have people staying there for more than a month. Also, the beginning of the quarantine, the government of Guatemala denounced that the government of the United States was sending deportees infected with COVID, and they stopped or they closed their borders to receive deportees. But El Salvador, or neither El Salvador or the Honduran government did the same, even though there were some infected deportees coming to El Salvador. Can you scroll down? Can I do it? Thank you. And then, as you know, Amanda hit El Salvador at the beginning of June. And as always, there was not like support from the government to those affected families. And according to people that we have talked to in our sister communities, they never received any support from the government. And when the president, the night of the disaster, came to one of the two most affected communities in San Salvador to say that he was committed with his government to support those families. And also he said that he was going to support with $10,000 to each family that lost their belongings and their houses. But so far, we haven't seen any report or any support for the communities where we are working with. Also, and this is something that Mario was mentioning, that every time, every chance that the president has to say that, or to blame others about all the difficulties that we're facing, or all the situations that are happening, that's the best place for do it is to like in a community that was just affected by a storm, that families lost everything, and he's saying, no, that's this is fault of politicians, and demonizing politicians. What else? And also something that Bukele has been, or his administration has been doing during the quarantine, is that they are not promoting people to for social distancing. Every time that they are giving food packages or providing any type of support, they are not letting people know or educating people about COVID. But instead of that, they are letting people know that we have to be scared about it, or we need to I don't know, like ask for more money. to support the poor people of El Salvador. Um, the next one is about corruption amid COVID pandemic, and well, there's a huge list of acts of corruption from this government just in 1 year in power. So I invite you all to go to our blog so you can read in details what Mario beautifully put together. But here we can, or I can say just a couple of things like the that investigative reports have exposed corruption. It is not because the government is presenting information about how they administer funds that they are asking for this emergency, but it's due to, or it's because investigative reports that have shown that the ministry or Minister of Health has been purchasing equipment for doctors or medical equipment from their relatives' company, or that a person, a government official, was selling face masks to the government from his own company. And that was, I think that was the first case that was exposed to the public light. And then what happened was that the government said, yeah, that's true. And because of our or during our campaign, we were saying we are not going to tolerate corruption in our government. So that in that case, the president removed that person from his position. But then the other cases, like this one of the Minister of Health and others, they are just trying to hide that information, or providing, like we say in El Salvador or in Spanish, cortinas de humo, smoke curtains, saying that the locusts are coming, or that the former Minister of Security has been captured because of his involvement with the truth with during Mauricio Funes' government. So there are many other cases as that we can mention, but I don't think we have enough time. So I invite you to go and read our blog. So you will find tons and tons of information about corruption. The next one is, so I was saying that how this, or we were saying how this government has been using funds and getting loans and debts. And despite all of the human rights abuses from this government, all the corruption, all the things that this government is doing, most Salvadorans approve this government, approve the way that the current government is administering, like, everything in this country. So here you can see that around 80% of the population approve or are in agreement, or is an agreement of this government. They think that this government has handled properly the pandemic. One important thing that caught my attention of this poll was that those that don't agree or don't support this government are supporters of Arena and FMLN political party and people older than 4 years old. So those are the ones that do not support Bukele. Also regarding a poll from the Jesuit University, it says that the acceptance of the government or from the people, from the acceptance of Bukele, no, from the people.
Yeah,
Mario.
how Salvadorans grade Bukele.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. From last year, from the first 100 years of Bukele in power, it has decreased a year after. So here, I don't see very well, but let me try. Yeah, so you can see that from 2019, that I think that was in that was carried out in September. And the other one was this June 2020. So there is a decrease, or it decreased, but still most Salvadorans still um, believe or approve this government. Um, so talking about funds and all the requests that Bukele and his administration has been asking for more money during this emergency, last weekend on Sunday, the president of the Legislative Assembly called the legislators to an extraordinary session, and they approved 200 million. Um, and can you scroll it down, please? So you can see how that fund will be distributed. But something that we want to point out is that this request was in discussion for some weeks, but it was approved after. Remember that we just had primary elections for political parties, and then in February we're having elections. Excuse me, for legislative assembly and municipalities. And during the past or the last weeks, we saw many marches and protests from the ex-combatants asking for this fund that they receive that has not been given during the last 3 months. And now the only ones that didn't approve this like what this fund in the Legislative Assembly were FMLN and the PDC. Yeah. So, and also there was this legislator that was asking the Legislative Assembly to create some mechanisms to to see how the government is using the funds here. I don't know, Mario, if you want to add something to this part.
Yeah, just quickly, that one of the things that the ex-combatants were saying, that it was divided because obviously many of them really wanted to have their pensions, and the other thing is that their pension is never included in the budget, and this loan will enable the government to provide the funds. So it was a card to use to make sure that the Legislative Assembly were to approve this fund. And as you can see over there, 20 millions are going to this disaster prevention and mitigation fund, where many of the investigations that have shed light to corruption show that these funds have been the ones used in all these cases of corruption, because it's easy to use it and move it around in different to different projects.
Thanks, Mario. To move on, I want to share a little bit about what CRIPDES has been doing during the pandemic or during the emergency. So, as you all know, we have been supporting CRIPDES and its regional to provide food packages to communities, and the 5 different regionals have been working very hard, providing this support. And here you can see the chart where it explains, or it shows how the amount of money, the number of families and communities. It's important to mention that, as I was saying, many communities didn't receive funds or didn't receive any support from the government. So the only support that they got was from CRIPDES or other organizations that are working locally. And also there were different communities that they organized themselves and looked for ways in order to support other communities. And we're very proud of having or working with those communities that are supporting each other. Also, there are some local committees from our network that have given direct support to their sister communities. Also during this quarantine, we as Sister Cities staff wanted to continue having or hearing, learning from the work that CRIPDES has been doing during the emergency, and how we can support them. So that's why we talk about having weekly phone calls with CRIPDES representatives of sister representatives, and also with coordinators of the each regional. So among many issues that we talk, among many things that they are facing, they shared with us that they want to prioritize their work within the coming months on education about COVID, because there is no education about it. Many people are afraid of going out, of gathering, and of course they should be afraid, but also they have to know about how they can prevent COVID. And that's something that we don't see in the mass media. So that's one priority for the regionals that you see here colored. Also productivity, like kitchen gardens and food security and food sovereignty. Many regionals, as you know, are working in these areas, but there are others that want to start this app or want to strengthen this work. Productive initiatives with youth. They want to provide youth in productive initiatives so they feel motivated. But this has been something very hard, because before the pandemic, there was not very like much motivation from youth to be involved in youth or in community organizing in some communities. And psychological support as well, education and accountability, or political school. This is about advocacy, because there are many municipalities that are receiving funds, and communities are not getting the support from the municipality, some of them. Also, campaign on human rights violations and gender violence and community organizing. Yeah, so that's what we were talking with CRIPDES regionals. And at the end of our phone calls, we had a meeting with the CRIPDES board, the CRIPDES national board, and they focus their like the strategies that they will work on two main issues that are advocacy, and the other one is productivity, providing or supporting food security and food sovereignty. So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sulma and Mario. That was a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So 3 people already posed questions. We'll start there. But then if you have a question and you're on Zoom, just type stack, the word stack, into our chat, and then I'll try to keep track of the order of when people came in, and then when it's your turn, you can pose your question. If you're joining us on phone, you're just going to have to butt in there and we'll get your questions answered as well. Sulma and Mario, do you think 15 minutes for questions?
Yeah, because we said that only an hour for people, like many people, they just wanted to have an hour, and just to respect that.
All right, so let's do about 15 minutes. If you have to go, no worries. Dennis, you have the floor.
Hi. There. Well, thank you for all of this. Is super to see you and everyone. So I think it's a great tool. I just was wondering if you I had asked on the chat whether you could give us a sense of just the trend of COVID in the country. Is it increasing, decreasing? What's the cases looking like?
Well, I can tell you this, Soma, you can join whenever you want, but We're not going down anytime soon, and there are several cases that are underreported. El Diario de Hoy keeps track of the daily, like, the official numbers, and we have overall, as of today, more than 18,000 cases, but that counts those who have recovered as well, and they have the number of 498 people that have died due to COVID.
Wow. Mm-hmm. The only, well, thank you for that. The only comment that just occurs to me is that the government, is being very autocratic and militaristic and rigorous about shutting down the country, and at the same time it's acquiescing to the U.S. in exporting COVID cases. It just seems crazy. Well, thank you.
All right, next was Jennifer. And then once again, just type stack in the chat. I see some of you are doing that. Nice job.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask how our sister cities are doing and how's the harvest. I know it's about time for the corn harvest, and I know that the folks in the lower Lempa were hit really hard by the hurricane, but how are the rains and how are our communities holding up? I know they were under quarantine even though they were in the rural area. So how are they doing? How are they functioning at the harvest time?
I can say that regarding harvest during this season or rainy season, we are having a good rainy season. It's not compared to other years. We have, or at least in this area where I am at right now, we have had enough rain. So there are many farmers that are harvesting now their first season of corn and beans. And I have heard from Chilama and a couple of other communities that they lost their crops during the Amanda storm, and that they were waiting for a second round of support from the government that he said he was going to provide to farmers, but they were also doubting about it because they know that the only ones that have received support have been Nuevas Ideas supporters.
And the other thing is when there were mentioned, people were talking about the locust plague, in the lower Lempa region, they told me that they were prepared for them every year in a small amount. So it's the same case. They think that it was mostly to create another kind of show because the army was ready to deal with the locusts as well. And as far as I know, farmers in Santa Ana haven't had any cases of locusts so far.
Next was Kathy from Cambridge.
I just had a question about what Fomilieno is.
Fomilieno is the Millennium Fund, how the U.S. supports El Salvador, and that's the way that they, for example, made sure that we were given, like the Salvadoran government, were not going to provide only native seeds, but modified seed, because if they were not providing the modified seed, they were going to be hurting U.S. companies such as Monsanto, and poor Monsanto. So it's the funds that they, with the different stages. The Millennium Fund, they have different stages in which they can support, and it's usually to build roads and stuff like that. Surma, it's okay?
Sure.
Next up is Jeff.
Yes, we were wondering if CRIPDES is still delivering food.
Yes. I think today we are on vacation right now, but the CRIPDES team is still working today. I know that the regional of UCRES have been providing some food to some communities. And also there are other projects that are providing support or funds to provide more food to some families. In terms of or regarding sister cities providing food, we already gave all the money that we raised to support our families, and there are some local communities and committees that are talking about how we can support our families in those communities since they lost their crops, since they don't have a job, how to support them with food. So we have started talking about supporting farmers in their communities with seeds, or creating kitchen gardens for women. And so we are just talking about that and see how this evolves with local committees.
Jennifer had kind of a follow-up. If you guys could just share how much sister cities raised for the food given out by CRIPDES. That might be a Willie question.
I think the fee was about 17,000, and then there was like another 4 or 5 for Amanda Relief. A little over $20,000 we raised.
And then Mark Rosenthal.
Hey, thanks all. I'm particularly interested in the organizing efforts that are taking place in opposition to the neoliberal program of Bukele. What is the relationship? And this is broad and probably way broader than we can go into in depth, but what is the relationship between the FMLN, the social movement, and CRIPDES, and maybe in particular, the environmental movement as it was organizing around issues of mining and water and privatization? Like, where does this stand in a broad sort of organizing effort right now?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm going to start, Mario, and then you can fill in. I can say that the relationship between the FMLN and the CRIPDES as a movement is unclear because we don't know if what's the plan for CRIPDES, if because in the past I know that the plan has been during this time of pre-elections, they have gathered or have invited some people from the FMLN to provide or to present some proposals from CRIPDES to the people of the FMLN or vice versa, and how to work together. But because of COVID, I don't know. But as individually, we see that there is a close relationship. There are many leadership of CRIPDES that are involved in the FMLN. They are running for being like mayors or being part of the community councils, and in a way that affects the work of CRIPDES, because we know, and many of you know, that the FMLN is not in a good position with the people right now, and there are many people in disagreement with the FMLN, and now having the figure of a CRIPDES leader within or running for a position with the FMLN, that the work of CRIPDES and its regionals makes it more difficult. So at a national or at a national level, like a CRIPDES movement is very hard to say at this point, because as I said, we haven't seen any like any meetings or we haven't heard any report from CRIPDES talking about how they are going to be working with the FMLN as a political party. Mm-hmm.
And the other initiative, for example, regarding water, I feel like there are many of these activities that are still finding their footing in this situation of not being able to gather, or the only people that usually have taken to the streets have been those in support of Bukele, even if it's a small number, but those are the ones that are not dragged in social media by him, because, you know, if it were the other way around, it's how irresponsible that they want to see people dead and stuff like that. So because of that, there are many challenges. There were these initiatives of, you know, making sure that we have a water law in place so people have real access to water in order to face COVID, and, you know, these other kind of small conversations, but not really in an organized way. I think people are still trying to figure it out and remember that we have this way of connecting, but it's not the case in rural areas where there's no Wi-Fi, or there's not the same access to technology, and this is very challenging. It has been challenging for CRIPDES itself as well.
So out of respect for everyone's time, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you again, Sulma and Mario, for organizing that presentation for us. And thanks everyone who showed up. So yeah. So someone was asking about the recording. I'm gonna stop.